"You're not coming home, Mom. It's decided." That was the last thing my son said before he looked away. My name is Linda. I'm 56, and the smell of antiseptic still sits heavy on my skin. My daughter Emily pretended to scroll her phone, though her eyes flicked toward me every few seconds like she was checking that I wouldn't make a scene. I didn't. I just watched them both and realized the word home had stopped meaning family. It meant storage now, a place to keep me out of sight. When they left, the nurse brought me water, her hand light on my shoulder. The room felt colder without their noise. "They'll be back tomorrow," she said softly. I nodded, because she needed to believe it, but I already knew. Something had ended that couldn't be fixed by another visit. I closed my eyes and tried to remember warmth. Christmas dinners where David carved the turkey, laughing at my crooked bow on his gift. Summers at the lake, Emily brushing sand off her knees while I packed sandwiches. The scent of coffee on quiet mornings when their father still sat beside me, humming old songs out of tune. Those memories glowed, brief but bright, before fading against the white hospital light. I turned my head toward the window. Outside, the sky carried that late afternoon dullness, the kind that makes you forget what month it is. A nurse adjusted the blinds. "You'll be discharged tonight," she said. I asked where I was going, though I already knew. "Your children arranged placement at St. Mark's Care Center," she replied. Her tone softened. "They said it's temporary." Temporary. That word can mean anything when spoken by someone who has already moved on. I asked to see the form they signed. It was still damp from ink, my name written where my consent should have been. I traced the line with my finger. My hands shook, not from weakness, but from understanding. David had mentioned bills the week before, something about unpaid utilities, the cost of my medication, his mortgage. Emily had whispered that things were tight. I had offered them my savings, but they'd refused then. Now I wondered if that conversation had already been part of their plan. The nurse hesitated before collecting the papers. "They looked tense," she said. "It's hard on families." I gave her a small smile. "Harder on the ones who stay." She didn't answer. When they came to say goodbye, Emily avoided my eyes. David hugged me quickly, like contact might stain him with guilt. "It's just for a while," he said. "You'll get better care there." I wanted to ask, care for what? But I kept my mouth shut. After they left, I sat in silence until the clock on the wall ticked past 6. I looked down at the hospital bracelet cutting a faint red line into my wrist. The tag read, "Discharge, pending transport." My wheelchair waited by the door like an obedient accomplice. The nurse returned with my bag packed. "Do you want me to call them?" she asked. I shook my head. "They'll call when it matters." The lie was for both of us. She nodded, uncertain, then left me alone again. The quiet grew thick, like something alive. I could almost hear the sound of our old house, the creak of the porch steps, the kettle whistling, Emily's laughter echoing down the hall. I whispered into that emptiness, "You'll understand one day." It wasn't anger. It was a promise. I watched the reflection of the empty chair across the room, its shadow stretching long under the fluorescent light. It felt like a rehearsal for the life ahead. Stillness, order, the slow fade of color. At exactly 7, the orderly arrived to wheel me out. "Your family's gone home already," he said, not looking at me. I nodded. My voice would have broken if I tried to speak. As we rolled through the corridor, I passed a mother helping her child tie his shoe. The boy laughed when he got it wrong. She smiled and tried again. That small moment pierced deeper than any goodbye could. When we reached the lobby, I asked the nurse to stop for a minute. I wanted to breathe without the walls listening. She stepped aside politely. I took one last look at the form in my lap, the ink already drying, my name beneath theirs, my future written without me. The air tasted sterile, metallic. I folded the paper, tucked it inside my bag, and said quietly, "This won't be the ending." 6 hours later, they came running. They didn't know what I overheard. The nurse was changing my IV when I caught their voices through the half-closed door. David's tone was sharp, controlled, the way he always spoke when money was involved. Emily whispered something I couldn't catch, then laughed too lightly. "She won't remember any of this," she said. My chest tightened. They were talking about my insurance, about policy amounts and coverage, not about me. I stared at the curtain folds, each line cutting my view into small pieces, the way they'd cut me out of their lives. The nurse glanced up. "Are you all right?" I nodded. My throat burned. She waited a second longer before stepping closer. "Mrs. Palmer," she said softly, "sometimes people say things they don't mean when they're tired." But her eyes told me she'd heard them too. The next morning, sunlight pushed through the blinds, warm and quiet. It touched the corner of the clipboard hanging by my bed. For a brief moment, I tried to hold on to something good. Emily brushing my hair when I couldn't lift my arms after the stroke. David fixing the porch steps before winter, coffee brewing, the smell filling the kitchen while I told them how proud I was. I could still hear their laughter in those memories. It felt almost real until the hallway voices replaced it. When the nurse came back at 8, she lowered her voice. "You didn't hear this from me," she said. "But your children, they've already spoken to billing about your long-term coverage. They mentioned moving you sooner than planned." I didn't move. My heart thudded, slow and heavy. "They talked like it was already done," she added. "I wrote a note about it in your chart, just in case." I turned my head toward the wall. "Thank you," I whispered. The hum of the bed alarm filled the silence, steady, almost rhythmic. I thought about the stack of unpaid bills at home, the envelopes I'd left on the counter. The life insurance premium was due this month. Maybe that's what they meant. Something about payouts, about numbers that made sense to them, but not to me. By noon, the nurse slipped a folded paper under my blanket. "For your record," she said. I waited until she left to read it. Her handwriting was careful, almost tender. She documented what she heard, the words policy, payment, and care home. Proof that kindness still existed somewhere, written in blue ink on a hospital note. I looked at the bracelet around my wrist, the same one David had helped put on when they admitted me. The plastic edge caught the light, sharp against my skin. I thought of cutting it off, but stopped. That small mark, that discomfort, reminded me to stay awake now, to see, to listen. When Emily called later that afternoon, her voice was bright. "How are you feeling, Mom?" I said I was fine. "We've been so worried," she said. "We'll come by tomorrow." I almost laughed. "Tomorrow," I repeated. "That's good." She hung up without saying, "Love you." The nurse checked my chart again before leaving for the evening. "You should rest," she said. "I'll make sure no one disturbs you tonight." I thanked her, though I knew rest wouldn't come easily anymore. Once you hear betrayal in someone's voice, it doesn't fade. It loops in your head until even silence sounds suspicious. As the lights dimmed in the hallway, I replayed their conversation word by word. Insurance, home, payment. Each syllable was a small cut, clean and efficient. The sound of their greed was quiet, almost professional. I closed my eyes, trying to remember the warmth of Emily's hand brushing mine, David's laugh when I scolded him for leaving tools on the table. Every image blurred at the edges. The truth sat beneath them, hard and cold. By midnight, the corridor fell silent, except for the hum of machines. I whispered to myself, "Listen before you forgive." It wasn't anger yet, just understanding. The truth cost more than my care ever did. My savings were gone before I left the ward. The nurse helped me into the wheelchair, her face calm, but her eyes said too much. I noticed the envelope she handed me, my discharge papers and a bank notice tucked inside. The air in the hallway felt cooler than before, the kind that makes your skin remember every bruise. By the time the cab turned onto the main road, I already knew something was wrong. At home, the house looked smaller. The stack of unopened mail waited on the table like evidence. I picked one, tore it open, and felt my stomach twist. My balanced savings emptied. Every cent transferred. I called David. "Mom, calm down," he said. His tone was tired, rehearsed. I handled the bills for the hospital. You don't need to worry. I didn't authorize anything, I said. You were medicated, he replied. You don't remember right. That line cut deeper than the money. Then show me the receipts. Silence. Emily called 5 minutes later. It's not what you think, she said. We just managed things while you were recovering. Managed things, I repeated. You mean stole. She sighed. Please don't start this. You're upset. David's under a lot of pressure. The business loan fell through. We only borrowed. Borrowed, I said, without asking. She didn't deny it. We'll fix it. I hung up before she could finish. The clock read 3:45 p.m. I stared at the second hand, steady, honest in a way my children no longer were. The next morning I went to the bank. The teller's smile cracked when she saw the screen. There were several withdrawals, she said, all online. Do you recognize this joint account? The printout trembled in my hand, my name at the top, his name below. The last transaction marked 2 days before my discharge. My breath caught. He did this while I was still in the hospital? I asked. She lowered her voice. It happens more often than you'd think. Do you want to freeze it? I nodded. My voice didn't feel like mine anymore. Yes. Freeze everything. The paper felt rough between my fingers, each number a small betrayal. It wasn't just about the money. It was about trust, dignity, control, all signed away under my own name. Walking out, the sun hit the pavement hard. The air smelled like heat and car exhaust. I kept thinking about that loan Emily mentioned. David's business had been struggling for years. He'd begged for help once, but I'd told him no. I thought it would teach him responsibility. Instead, it taught him desperation. That night, I sat by the kitchen table with the statement laid out in front of me. The house was silent except for the refrigerator hum. I rehearsed what I'd say the next day. My tone would be calm, not angry, not broken, just factual. You took what wasn't yours, I'd say, and now you'll answer for it. I picked up my phone, hesitated, then set it back down. The urge to hear his voice fought with the urge to protect what was left of me. I folded the papers, slid them into an old envelope marked insurance, and placed it in the drawer beside my will. If they thought I was weak, they'd soon find out how wrong that was. The phone rang once more before midnight. I let it go to voicemail. I didn't need to hear another lie. I already knew the truth, and tomorrow they would too. He hung up before I could finish the word trust. They arrived smiling, like nothing happened. The smell of baked chicken filled the hallway before they even stepped inside. Emily carried a casserole dish wrapped in foil, the kind she used to bring over during holidays. David followed with a forced grin, his voice too bright. "We thought we'd surprise you." I let them in. The house felt smaller with them standing there, their laughter echoing off walls that had grown used to silence. The kitchen clock ticked loud between us. I noticed the window curtain shifting with the evening breeze, the faint sound of my neighbor, Mrs. Lane, watering her plants outside. She'd waved when their car pulled up. She always watched, quiet but aware. David placed the food on the counter. "You're looking better," he said. "Stronger." "I've been resting," I replied. Thinking. Emily pulled out plates like it was any other Sunday. "You shouldn't stress yourself," she said. "We've taken care of everything." Her tone carried that careful sweetness people use when they're managing guilt. I sat at the table, my hands folded. "Everything?" I asked. She smiled, too quickly. "The bills, your medication, all of it. You can just focus on getting well." I kept my voice steady. "What about the account?" David froze, spoon halfway to the serving bowl. "Mom, please, not tonight." "I'd like an answer." He exhaled, heavy. "It was a misunderstanding. The transfers were temporary. I told the bank that." "Temporary?" I said. "My name was removed." Emily leaned forward, her eyes narrowing. "We did it for you. You weren't thinking straight after the stroke. We were trying to help." "That's what you call it?" Silence. The kind that eats up a room and spits it back out colder. Mrs. Lane's silhouette moved past the window, pausing. She was close enough to hear if she wanted to. I almost hoped she would. David cleared his throat. "We don't deserve this tone after everything we've done. Driving back and forth, handling your care, taking time off work. It's been hard." I studied his hands. They trembled when he reached for his glass. Guilt always finds its way into the smallest muscles first. Emily's voice softened. "You've been through enough. Let's not fight. We just want peace." I let that word hang. Peace. They wanted quiet, not truth. After dinner, David stood at the sink washing dishes he'd barely touched. Emily gathered the leftovers, wrapping them carefully. I could feel their unease growing. They knew the balance had shifted. When the door finally closed behind them, I stayed in the kitchen, watching the curtain sway again. Across the yard, Mrs. Lane's light flicked on. She stood at her window, her face faint in the glow, watching. There was comfort in knowing someone else had seen them leave smiling, pretending the world hadn't cracked in half. That night, I made a choice. No more joint anything. No shared keys, no open drawers, no hidden access. I called the bank the next morning, told the clerk I wanted every password changed. Her voice was gentle but firm. "It's done," she said. I thanked her and felt something inside me tighten. Not fear, not regret, but resolve. When Emily texted at noon asking if I'd eaten, I didn't reply. The distance felt clean, the air around me quiet, almost new, but by midnight my phone wouldn't stop ringing. They said I was losing my mind. Emily stood in the doorway holding a paper like it was evidence. Her tone was steady, careful. "Mom, Dr. Henson wrote this," she said. "He's concerned. You've been confused lately." The words felt rehearsed, like she'd practiced them in the car. I took the paper from her hand. My name was there, but the rest was wrong. Too clean, too simple. The sentences didn't sound like a doctor. They sounded like David. I read it again. "He thinks I'm incapable of managing my own affairs?" Emily hesitated. "He just wants what's best for you." "Then why isn't it signed?" Her face stiffened. "You're overreacting." The nurse, the same one who'd whispered the truth in the hospital, stepped closer. She looked at the page, then back at me. "This isn't official," she said quietly. "It doesn't even have a letterhead." Emily's tone sharpened. "We're trying to help. You keep forgetting things." "No," I said, my voice steady. "I've started remembering too much." The nurse stayed silent, but her presence grounded me. She'd seen enough to understand this wasn't confusion. It was control disguised as care. When Emily left, she made sure to slam the door. The sound echoed through the small room like punctuation. The nurse picked up the crumpled page. "You should keep this," she said. "It's not proof yet, but it's something." I nodded. "Why would they need this?" "Because if you doubt yourself," she said, "they don't need to prove anything." I sat back, the air heavy. The faint smell of antiseptic drifted from the counter where my pill bottles lined up like soldiers. I counted them. Nothing missing, nothing extra, but the thought lingered. If they could fake a doctor's note, they could twist anything. At 5 p.m., I heard a car door outside. I didn't look. I knew it was David, pacing in the driveway like he did when angry. The nurse closed my file and glanced toward the window. "Do you want me to talk to him?" "No," I said. "Let him wait." For once, I wanted the silence to work for me. She leaned against the counter. "I've seen this before," she said softly. "Families trying to prove incompetence so they can manage the accounts. You're not the first." Her words hit like cold water. "So what do I do?" "Get proof before they get power," she said. "And never argue where you can record." I didn't know whether to be relieved or terrified. When David finally came in, his smile was tight. "Mom, why didn't you answer? Emily's worried sick." I folded the fake note and slipped it under a folder. "I was talking to the nurse," I said. "She's just staff," he replied. "We're family. We know what's best for you." That phrase, again. We know what's best." He looked around, his eyes scanning the counters, the drawers, as if the house still belonged to him. "You should rest," he said. "All this stress isn't good for your condition." "What condition?" He hesitated. "The one you're denying." I laughed once, sharp and quick. "If I were really unfit, you wouldn't need forged papers to prove it." His jaw tightened. "You're making things worse for yourself." I met his stare and didn't look away. "No, David. I'm just keeping score." He stormed out, muttering something about lawyers. The nurse watched from the doorway. "You handled that well," she said. I exhaled slowly. "It didn't feel like it." "It did," she said. "You stayed calm. That's the part they can't stand." After she left, I took out a notebook. I wrote down everything: dates, words, the way Emily's eyes darted, the way David's hand shook. My handwriting looked shaky, but clear. I tucked the fake note between the pages. For the first time, I understood the cost of pride. I'd waited too long to act, too long to believe they'd stop. But now I had a start, something that could grow into proof. The lamp flickered once before the power steadied. I stared at my reflection in the dark window and whispered, "You're not crazy. You're careful." This time, I kept their lies on record. I didn't call him. He came because she did. The doorbell rang just past 10 a.m., sharp enough to cut through the quiet. When I opened it, a man in a gray suit stood there, holding a briefcase. He introduced himself simply. "I'm here on behalf of a mutual friend," he said. The nurse had sent him. He stepped inside, careful not to track mud across the floor. The morning light caught the papers in his hand. "You might want to sit," he said. His tone wasn't dramatic, just certain. I sat at the kitchen table, the same chair where I used to balance my checkbook every Sunday before church. He placed a folder in front of me. "These were filed last week," he said. "Your children submitted them to the county clerk's office. Power of attorney. It gives them full control over your accounts and assets." I stared at the signature. My own name, written in a way that mimicked mine, but lacked the slant of my usual handwriting. "That's not me," I said. "I know," he replied. "That's why I'm here." He slid the paper closer. "They claimed you're medically unfit. The document references a note from Dr. Henson, unsigned, of course. Without a challenge, it becomes effective in 30 days. I traced the pen strokes with my finger, each curve and line of the forgery like a small wound reopening. The paper's texture was smooth but cold, slick with deceit. "Can it be stopped?" "Yes," he said. "We file a motion to revoke, supported by medical verification. Your nurse already wrote a statement confirming your clarity and that she witnessed coercion attempts." I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. "So she told you everything?" "She told me enough," he said. "Enough to know they're counting on your silence." The clock ticked behind us. It was 10:27 a.m., an ordinary moment split by extraordinary betrayal. I looked around the room at the bills stacked neatly beside the fridge, the framed photo of my children smiling from last Christmas. All of it looked staged now, like props in someone else's story. "Why would they risk forgery?" I asked. "Because it works more often than you'd think," he said. "Most people your age don't fight back." That line stung, but it lit something inside me. "Then let's make sure I'm not most people." He smiled slightly. "That's the right answer." He opened his briefcase and handed me another document, a draft revocation order. "You'll need to sign this in front of a notary. It freezes all further transfers until a hearing." "So they won't touch anything else?" "Not legally," he said, "but expect pushback. They'll realize what's happening fast." I nodded. "Good. Let them." He studied me for a second. "You're remarkably calm." "I've spent my life reacting," I said. "Now I'm learning to respond." He closed his folder. "Control isn't revenge," he said quietly. "It's protection." After he left, I sat for a long time. The smell of coffee lingered from earlier, now bitter and cold. I looked at the phone, wondering how long before they found out. Every step forward would expose something new. That's what power does. It doesn't just move, it reveals. By noon, I called the bank again. The clerk confirmed the freeze was active. "We'll notify all connected parties," she said. I thanked her and hung up. An hour later, a text arrived from David. "We need to talk, now." I didn't reply. Another message followed. "Mom, you don't understand what you're doing." Oh, I understood perfectly. That night, I signed the revocation papers under the witness of the notary who came to the house. His stamp pressed down with a heavy click, sealing more than a document. It sealed intent. I watched him drive away through the front window. The chair creaked beneath me as I sat again at the table, the folder still open, the forged signature staring back. I touched the pen the lawyer had left behind and whispered, "My name still belongs to me." The court letter reached them before my next call. They tried to settle before anyone found out. David called first, his voice unusually calm. "Mom, let's just talk before this gets messy," he said. Emily texted soon after, long messages about family, forgiveness, and keeping things private. I didn't reply to either. By then, the hearing notice had arrived. The date was printed in bold at the top, a quiet declaration that truth had a time and place now. The morning of mediation, the courthouse steps gleamed with rain. My lawyer met me halfway up, folder in hand. "They'll want to bargain," he said. "If you agree, this never goes on record." I want it on record, I told him. All of it. Inside, the air was cool and thin. The hum of conversation filled the waiting area. David stood by the window, pretending to read his phone. Emily avoided my eyes, fidgeting with her bracelet. For once, the guilt wasn't mine to carry. When we were called in, the mediator, a calm woman with sharp eyes, explained the process. "This is an opportunity to resolve matters privately," she said. "Once the transcript is filed, it becomes public." David leaned forward. "We don't need to drag this out. I already told her the money was temporary." I turned toward him slowly. "You said that on the phone, too. Now you can say it under oath." The mediator's pen moved across the page. That single sentence shifted the air. Emily's head dropped. "She's confused," David snapped. "Mom doesn't understand how accounts work." I looked at my lawyer. He opened the folder, slid a printed bank statement across the table. "These transfers were not temporary," he said. "They were routed through your business account, repeatedly." David's face tightened. "That's not theft. It was family money." "Family money," I repeated softly. But only one family member signed the checks. For a moment, no one spoke. The clock on the wall ticked toward 11. The mediator cleared her throat. "Do you wish to amend your previous statement, Mr. Carter?" He hesitated, then, barely above a whisper, "I borrowed it. I was going to pay it back." Every word was recorded, black ink sealing what years of guilt had kept hidden. Emily looked up, eyes wet, but said nothing. Silence can be a kind of confession, too. When the session ended, the mediator handed me a copy of the transcript. The page felt heavier than it should have, as if the truth itself carried weight. My lawyer walked beside me as we left. "That was brave," he said. "No," I said. "It was overdue." We stepped out into the light drizzle. The courthouse steps shone pale against the gray sky. I paused halfway down, the folder tucked under my arm, and watched David and Emily standing by the doors. They weren't arguing anymore. They looked like children who'd been caught stealing from an unlocked drawer. "Do you think they'll recover from this?" my lawyer asked. "I think," I said, "they'll finally learn who they're dealing with." We reached the car just as a message came through on my phone, another attempt from David, full of apologies wrapped in excuses. I didn't open it. Some words don't deserve to be read twice. The bracelet on my wrist, Emily's last birthday gift before all this, caught a drop of rain. I turned it once, remembering the warmth that used to mean something. Then I closed my fist, transparency over fear. That was the choice, and for the first time it felt clean. As we drove away, I looked back at the courthouse. People were gathering on the steps, their voices low, their curiosity loud. I knew what that meant. Someone leaked the story before sunset. My name appeared before I was ready. The newspaper sat on my porch when I opened the door that morning. The headline stretched across the top, "Elder Abuse Allegation Splits Family." My face was printed below, grainy but recognizable. I stared at it for a long moment, the air around me strangely still. By the time I made tea, my phone was already ringing. "What have you done?" Emily's voice cracked through the line. "You've ruined everything. People are calling, asking if it's true." I said nothing. The cup warmed my hands. "It's not my doing," I told her. "The court filings are public. Reporters just did their job." "They twisted it," she said. "They made us look like monsters." I heard her crying, but it was the kind that hides anger beneath shame. "Maybe," I said quietly, "you shouldn't have given them the story to write." Outside, a white car lingered by the curb. A man leaned against it, camera hanging from his neck. He waved slightly, pretending politeness. I closed the blinds. The lawyer called around noon. "Don't answer questions," he said. "Let them talk. The story will fade once the facts surface." "I don't want sympathy," I replied. "I want the truth." "Sympathy helps in court," he reminded me. I didn't answer. I had already learned that pity cuts both ways. It comforts and diminishes. Around 3 p.m., another reporter called. "Mrs. Carter, do you wish to comment on the allegations?" "No," I said. "But write this: silence doesn't mean guilt." Then I hung up. That night, the news segment aired. My house appeared briefly, my name spoken like a scandal. I turned off the television, poured another cup of tea, and watched the steam rise. The calm felt almost defiant. I thought of the years I spent protecting those children from whispers, from embarrassment, from judgment. Now the roles were reversed. They had crafted their own public humiliation, and I had nothing left to lose. The next morning, neighbors came by pretending casual concern. "We saw the paper," one said, "and just wanted to check on you." "I'm fine," I replied, offering a small smile. Truth doesn't bruise. When they left, I looked again at the folded newspaper on the counter. The ink smudged slightly where my thumb rested. Beneath the noise, there was relief. The lie wasn't private anymore. Later, the lawyer sent a message. "Public opinion's turning. People are calling the firm, asking about elder rights. Stay patient." Patience. That word had been my cage for years. Now it was a weapon. I kept the blinds closed, stayed quiet, and let their own words echo back at them. By the end of the week, a new headline appeared: "Witnesses support defendant in family power dispute." My name again, smaller this time, surrounded by quotes from those who'd seen enough to speak. I didn't celebrate. I simply folded the paper in half, placed it under my teacup, and let the ring stain through the word allegation. The phone rang once more that evening. The caller ID showed an unfamiliar number. I almost ignored it, until I saw the name. The next call came from the judge's office. I couldn't sleep, not from fear, but clarity. The room felt smaller that night, as if the walls knew what was coming. The lamp on my bedside table cast a narrow circle of light, and the rest of the house lay in shadows. I hadn't turned off the lamp in weeks. Somehow that small glow helped me think. I reached for the recorder beside it, the same one the lawyer had handed me after the hearing. "Keep it safe," he'd said. "It holds everything they tried to bury." I pressed play. David's voice filled the quiet. "Just say she forgot to sign," he told Emily. "She doesn't remember details anymore. That's all you need to say." Emily's voice came next, softer but certain. "And if she denies it?" "Then you act hurt. Say she's confused. Make them pity you." The sound of their calm planning made my stomach twist. I stopped the tape halfway through. The silence that followed was worse. It was 1:12 a.m. The numbers on the clock glowed faintly, marking time I couldn't afford to waste. I leaned back against the headboard, the recorder resting in my palm. The weight of it felt heavier than any object that small should. Inside, a voice, my own, spoke quietly. "You have enough now. Let truth carry itself." The lawyer had been clear earlier that day. "The evidence is airtight," he said. "The calls prove intent, but they'll still fight. Expect pressure before morning." He was right. 2 hours later, Emily's text arrived. "Mom, please, don't destroy the family. We can fix this privately." I stared at the words for a long time. Privately, that word again. Privacy had protected them, not me. I typed one line back. "Tomorrow, everything comes into light." Then I powered off the phone. I thought about the money, the court fees, the drained savings, the retainer I'd paid without hesitation. I'd once worried about grocery bills and repairs. Now my expenses were measured in integrity. Every dollar lost was proof that I'd stopped surrendering. Around 3 a.m., I made tea. The quiet hum of the kettle steadied my breathing. My hands trembled slightly as I poured, the same hands that used to write checks for their tuition, their rent, their comfort. That generosity had built their arrogance. I sat on the bed again, the cup warm in my grip. The recorder's red light blinked softly, waiting, patient, alive. "They'll try to play innocent," I whispered, "but the truth's already recorded." I remembered the nurse's words after the first forgery surfaced. "Pride's expensive," she'd said gently. She was right. Justice costs even more. When dawn began to push through the curtains, I finally lay down. The lamp still burned beside me, pale against the gray morning. I didn't turn it off. I wanted the day to find me awake, prepared, unafraid. My thoughts drifted to what waited ahead: the courtroom, the witnesses, the faces that once smiled at family dinners. Would they look at me with anger or shame? Maybe both. But for the first time, it didn't matter. I had spent years believing that love required silence, that forgiveness meant surrender. Tonight taught me something else. Love without truth is just dependency dressed as virtue. I ran my fingers over the recorder again, its edges smooth from use. "This is all that's left," I murmured, "and it's enough." By 5 a.m., I rose, showered, and dressed. The mirror showed a woman I barely recognized, steady eyes, drawn lines, no hesitation. The robe hanging behind me looked like someone else's life. I left it there. The phone buzzed once more, but I didn't check. The judge's clerk would call soon, confirming the morning's session. The final proof would be presented, the voices they could no longer deny. As I gathered the files into my bag, the lamp flickered once, then steadied again. The house seemed to breathe with me, as if it understood that something irreversible was about to begin. I took one last look at the room, the bed, the light, the empty cup, and whispered to myself, "They won't recognize." "The woman who enters tomorrow." He called me senile in open court. The words hit harder than I expected, though I'd prepared for everything. The courtroom was still, except for the soft hum of the overhead fans. The smell of polish and old wood carried a strange weight. My lawyer leaned close and whispered, "Stay calm. Let the record speak." Across the aisle, David sat straight, his suit sharp, expression rehearsed. "My mother's been struggling," he told the judge. "She forgets details. She's easily influenced. We were only protecting her." I watched his mouth move, shaping lies into something that sounded reasonable. Emily nodded beside him, eyes down, hands clenched. The lawyer played it like a script, smooth, steady, hollow. When my turn came, I rose slowly, gripping the edge of the table. "You said I forget," I began, "but you remember everything that benefits you." David looked away. The judge motioned for me to continue. "I remember signing papers that weren't mine. I remember phone calls about temporary loans that never returned. I remember being told to rest while my accounts were emptied." The courtroom was quiet. My voice didn't shake. I wanted the truth to stand on its own legs, not lean on emotion. The lawyer for the defense interrupted. "Mrs. Carter, you're implying your son forged your signature. Do you have evidence?" "Yes," I said. "A statement from the nurse who saw the unsigned form, a recording of their plan, and the bank's verification that I was declared incompetent without examination." Gasps flickered through the small audience. The judge nodded to the clerk, who began typing faster. Every word became permanent. David muttered, "She's twisting everything." The judge turned toward him. "You'll have your turn, Mr. Carter." I continued. "He didn't just take money, he took my dignity. He made my daughter his witness instead of my child." Emily started to cry then, soft at first, then louder. "He told me it was just a delay," she said through tears. "He said she wouldn't notice." The judge raised his hand. "Order." The gavel struck once. The sound echoed like a heartbeat. I looked at Emily. "You're not my enemy," I told her, "but silence can be cruelty too." My lawyer handed the judge the transcript of David's earlier statements, the contradictions lined neatly on paper. The judge read in silence. The courtroom clock ticked toward noon. Then came the question that felt heavier than any accusation. "Mrs. Carter," the judge asked, "why pursue this publicly instead of privately within your family?" I met his eyes. "Because privacy is where people like them hide what they do. Justice deserves witnesses." The judge didn't respond. He just nodded once, then turned to David. "Do you wish to respond to your mother's testimony?" David hesitated. His confidence cracked under the weight of his own performance. I thought I was helping," he said finally. She needed guidance." "Guidance," I repeated softly. "That's what thieves call concern." The judge tapped his gavel again. "Enough." In that silence, the balance shifted. The air itself changed. No shouting, no victory cries, just exposure. That's how power collapses, not with noise, but recognition. The judge adjusted his glasses and looked at me. "Mrs. Carter, the court acknowledges your full mental competence and financial independence. Your guardianship status is revoked effective immediately." My lawyer exhaled. Emily sobbed quietly. David sank back in his chair, his hand covering his face. I didn't smile. Justice wasn't joy. It was restoration. And restoration always costs something. When the judge stood to close the hearing, I felt the tension leave my shoulders for the first time in months. I turned the bracelet on my wrist, its metal warm against my skin. It had been Emily's gift once, now a symbol of everything she'd watched and said nothing about. As the courtroom emptied, the judge looked toward me again. "Mrs. Carter," he said, "given the evidence, you have grounds to file criminal charges. Do you wish to press them?" I looked at David, then at Emily, both smaller than I remembered. The question hung in the air, sharp as glass. The judge asked if I wished to press charges. I said no. The courtroom was nearly empty by then, just the shuffle of papers and the echo of closing doors. My lawyer leaned toward me. "It's done," he said. "You've won." The judge's ruling lay on the table, edges crisp, words final. My name at the top, the restoration of financial control below it. Simple language for something that had cost me almost everything. "They won't face prison?" I asked quietly. The lawyer hesitated. "No, the judge emphasized restitution, not punishment. Their accounts will be audited, your losses reimbursed, but no time served." I nodded. "Mercy, then." "Justice," he corrected. But it didn't feel like justice. It felt like exhaustion in legal form. The sound of the clock on the wall filled the silence, each tick steady, measured, cruel in its calm. It was 3:00 p.m. I would remember that. The exact moment I stopped expecting an apology. David approached, face pale. "Mom, can we talk?" "No," I said simply. Emily stood behind him, her eyes swollen from crying. She started to speak, but I raised my hand. "You had chances to talk. You used every one to lie." David tried again. "We were scared. The media—" "You were scared of losing control," I interrupted. Not of hurting me. He looked down. The arrogance that once filled every word was gone. What remained was something smaller, almost hollow. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Reporters are waiting outside," he said softly. "They'll want your reaction." "I have none," I replied. "Let the ruling speak." We stepped into the corridor. The marble floor gleamed, reflecting the late afternoon light. A few journalists called my name, microphones extended. I walked past them without a word. Silence was my final statement. At the end of the hall, a clerk handed me a copy of the signed order. The paper was warm from the printer, the ink still faintly glossy. I folded it once, then again, and slipped it into my bag. It felt lighter than it should have, given everything it meant. Outside, cars lined the courthouse steps. David and Emily stood apart, speaking to no one. I saw the shame in their posture, the slow collapse of people who had built their lives on my silence. Now they would have to live with mine. My lawyer touched my arm. "You did the right thing," he said. "Right doesn't always feel right," I answered. He smiled sadly. "You could still press charges." "I could," I said, "but I won't." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Then it's over." "Nothing that breaks a family is ever over," I said quietly. "It just stops bleeding." The courthouse clock struck once more, long, resonant, final. I started walking toward the parking lot, the sound fading behind me. In the car, I sat still for a while before turning the key. The envelope with the court seal lay on the passenger seat. Freedom, they called it. But freedom felt quieter than I imagined, like the space after a storm when no one dares to speak. I thought of the years spent raising them, teaching right from wrong, thinking love could survive deceit. I thought of the nights counting bills, covering their debts, trusting their promises. Money was never the point. It was trust that was stolen, and trust doesn't have receipts. My phone buzzed once more with messages I didn't read. Reporters, distant relatives, maybe even sympathy. I let it ring out. Some victories don't need witnesses. When I reached home, I left the ruling on the kitchen counter and boiled water for tea. The steam rose slowly, curling in the afternoon light. I didn't pour a second cup. That habit was gone now. The clock in the hallway ticked steadily, the same rhythm as in court, the same hour. Freedom can feel quieter than grief. I changed the locks the next morning. The locksmith arrived just after 8, his van humming in the driveway. He didn't ask questions, just got to work. The sound of metal turning inside the old lock was sharp, final. Each click felt like a small declaration. This house belongs to me again. While he worked, I packed what was left of their photos. Smiling faces, celebrations that had felt genuine then, hollow now. Didn't rip or burn them. I just placed them in a box, closed the lid, and labeled it with a single word: past. The sun spilled through the front window, the same one Emily used to draw hearts on when she was little. I remembered her giggling, pressing her small fingers into the dust. That memory didn't hurt anymore. It just existed, like a chapter that had finally finished its sentence. When the locksmith handed me the new key, I turned it over in my palm. Cold, smooth metal. "All set," he said. "You're secure now." "I know," I replied. And I did. After he left, I sat in the quiet living room, surrounded by the echoes of what used to be noise. I noticed the chair by the window, its armrest worn from years of habit. That's where I'd sat counting bills, reading letters, pretending things weren't falling apart. I brushed the dust from it and whispered, "Not anymore." By noon, I had paid the month's utilities online, all in my name again. The simple act of typing each confirmation brought a strange sense of pride. The mortgage payment went out next, steady, on time, without anyone else's approval. Independence doesn't come cheap, but it feels like the only honest investment left. I opened the fridge. It was full for once, everything bought with my own earnings. No shared accounts, no uncertain permissions, just my choices, my food, my home. A few neighbors waved from across the street. They'd seen the police, the court days, The visitors who stopped coming once money wasn't easy to borrow. I waved back, not to explain or defend, just to mark my place in the world again. Around 3, I walked through each room, locking eyes with old furniture as if confirming a truce. The air smelled different now, cleaner, lighter. The heaviness that used to sit in the corners had lifted. I stopped at the front door, ran my hand along its new brass handle. The locksmith's work gleamed faintly under the sunlight. I locked it once, then unlocked it again, testing the rhythm of safety. "Entry by invitation only," I said aloud, smiling. I made tea and sat by the window as afternoon slipped toward evening. I didn't think about what they were doing. David, Emily, the family who once filled these walls. Their absence was no longer an ache. It was space. My lawyer had sent the final receipts that morning. The settlement funds deposited, accounts corrected, debts cleared. No grand fortune, just enough to live steady. Enough to never depend again. As the light dimmed, I picked up the new key and placed it on the table beside my cup. It glinted faintly, catching the last bit of sun before dusk swallowed the room. It looked small for what it represented. For years, I believed strength needed witnesses, someone to see the pain, to name it, to validate it. But sitting there alone, I realized the truth. Strength isn't something you show, it's something you live quietly, like breathing. I turned on the lamp and let the room settle into stillness. There was no noise, no tension, no waiting, just calm. Then the phone buzzed. A single voicemail notification appeared on the screen. Unknown number. I stared at it for a moment, the key still warm in my hand. I didn't play it right away, but the voicemail came before evening. He said he was sorry, then asked for money. The message came just after lunch. I recognized his voice before the words even formed. "Mom, I made mistakes. I shouldn't have let things get this far. I just need a little help to get back on my feet." His tone cracked in the right places, pauses perfectly timed. It was the kind of apology built to sell hope, not truth. I sat at the kitchen table, phone in my hand, the afternoon light stretching long across the floor. The same table where I once signed checks for his tuition, his first car, the down payment for his house. I pressed play again. "I'll pay you back," he said. "I swear I will. You've always believed in me. Just one more time." The old reflex pulled at me, the instinct to rescue, to reason, to reach out. But then I heard the pause before "one more time." That tiny beat of calculation. It wasn't guilt, it was strategy. I replayed it twice, listening not to what he said, but to what he didn't. The silence between words was the truest part. When the message ended, I called my lawyer. "He left another voicemail," I said. "Let me guess," he replied. "Regret, apology, and a request?" "Almost in that order." "Then don't respond," he said. "Deleting it is cheaper than another mistake." I smiled faintly. Cheaper, that's one way to put it. I hung up and stared at the envelope on the counter, the final statement from the settlement, confirming the last payment had cleared. No debts, no shared accounts, no remaining obligations. The financial cord between us was officially cut. It felt unreal, like standing on new ground after years of sinking. I opened the window slightly. The late-day air carried a quiet hum from the street. No traffic, no voices, just the distant rhythm of ordinary life continuing without me in it. I had spent so long measuring my worth by how much I gave. Now giving nothing was its own kind of power. My phone buzzed again, another notification. Same number, another voicemail. I didn't listen this time. I deleted it straight away. The sound of the deletion chime felt final, like a door clicking shut from the inside. I poured myself a glass of water and sat down. For years, my survival had depended on their validation, their acknowledgement, their approval. They used love like currency. I traded peace for proximity, trust for illusion. But now, the silence was mine. My lawyer had warned me that guilt was the last weapon they'd try. "They'll test your boundaries," he'd said. "They'll use emotion where money failed." He was right. David's voice still echoed faintly in my head, the familiar tone that once meant family. but that echo was fading, replaced by something steadier, clarity. I folded the settlement envelope neatly and placed it inside the drawer where old bills used to live. That drawer used to feel like a burden filled with unpaid invoices and worry. Now it held proof of closure. The house was quiet except for the ticking clock on the wall. It marked each second evenly, unbothered by what had been lost or gained. The same rhythm that once haunted me now sounded like peace. I thought of Emily for a moment. She hadn't called since the verdict. Maybe she was ashamed. Maybe she was free too. Some relationships only heal through distance. I walked to the living room, phone still in my hand, screen dark. I could have played the message again, searched for sincerity, imagined change, but I knew better. Some people apologize not to fix what they broke, but to see if the door is still open. This one isn't. I set the phone on the table beside the envelope. Both objects represented old systems of control, one emotional, one financial. Both now silent. Forgiveness doesn't always sound like kindness. Sometimes it sounds like nothing at all. Outside, the sky turned a soft gray. The day had moved without me noticing, hours dissolving into calm. I didn't reach for the phone again. I didn't need to. Some goodbyes don't need witnesses. I made coffee for one, and it was enough. The morning light spread across the kitchen counter, soft and golden. The smell of fresh coffee filled the room, sharp but comforting. I poured it slowly, watching the steam rise and twist in the quiet air. There was no rush now, no phone waiting to ring, no decisions hanging heavy over the day. Just me and the small sound of the cup setting against the saucer. Through the window, I saw Mrs. Lane on her porch, waving with that same gentle smile she'd offered since the day I moved here. She held up a folded newspaper. "You're in it again," she called out. I stepped outside to meet her. The air was cool, the grass still wet. She handed me the paper, her eyes bright with pride. The headline read, "Elder Rights Reform Passes After Landmark Case." I traced the words with my thumb, feeling the print's slight texture. It wasn't about me by name, but I knew what story had sparked it. The hearings, the testimony, the quiet strength it had taken to stand there without breaking. My case had turned into something larger, something that might protect others who'd been dismissed, disbelieved, or used. Mrs. Lane touched my arm. "You did more than survive," she said softly. "You changed something." I smiled. That wasn't the plan. "Maybe it never is," she said. We stood there for a moment, the sun climbing higher. The warmth reached the steps, brushing over our faces. I remembered how, not long ago, I'd watched light like this from behind closed curtains, afraid of what waited beyond them. Now it felt like permission to begin again. Inside, I placed the paper beside my cup. The bracelet lay next to it, catching a faint glint of sunlight. It had been Emily's gift years ago, a chain of small silver links that once felt like a tether. Now it was just an object. I kept it not as a reminder of pain, but as proof that it no longer held power. The kitchen clock ticked toward 8. Ordinary time. For once, it didn't feel like a countdown. I took a sip of coffee. It was slightly bitter the way I liked it. The taste grounded me, pulling me back to simple things: routine, peace, choice. Freedom, I realized, isn't loud or triumphant. It's quiet. It's the space left when fear moves out. The mail arrived early. A few envelopes slid through the slot. Bills, flyers, one letter from the local foundation asking me to speak at their next event. I laughed under my breath. A year ago, I couldn't say my own truth without shaking. Now they wanted me to share it with strangers. I sat at the table and unfolded the letter. They were hosting a forum on protecting family assets and elder autonomy. My testimony had apparently inspired it. I read the line twice before setting it down. I wasn't sure if I'd go. Maybe someday. For now, silence said enough. Outside, a car door closed. Mrs. Lane's grandson waved from across the street before heading off to school. I waved back. Small moments of life returning, steady, predictable, kind. I looked around my kitchen, every surface finally mine again. The bills paid on time, the fridge stocked, the cupboards organized by my own rhythm. It wasn't about control anymore. It was about belonging. To myself. My lawyer had called last week to say the trust was finalized, that no one could contest it now. "It's all yours," he'd said. I thanked him, but I'd already known. Ownership isn't about papers. It's about peace. As the sun moved higher, I leaned back in the chair and let the warmth reach me fully. For years, my life had revolved around waiting for someone to change, to call, to apologize. Now I understood the truth. Peace doesn't arrive when they come back. It arrives when you stop expecting them to. I glanced once more at the bracelet beside my cup, the faint light catching its edge. "They will understand what it means to be left," I whispered, and for the first time, I believed it. They finally understood what it means to be left. Did you enjoy this story? Tell me which city you're listening from. I read every comment. If the story touched you, you can support the channel with a super thanks so I can keep bringing more stories like this every day. Your encouragement really helps. I'd love to hear your thoughts and what moment stayed with you. On the screen, you can see 2 new life stories that I highly recommend. There's plenty more on the channel as well. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. See you in the next life story, with respect and gratitude.